So, Karate Kid's back. Only, it's kind of been back, right? Karate Kid has always been a franchise I've had a strange fascination for. Growing up doing martial arts, I did Taekwondo as a kid. You'd imagine this would be a cornerstone of my childhood, right? Well, not exactly. You see, growing up when I did, my first entry point to the franchise was actually the Jaden Smith Jackie Chan reboot in 2010. And not knowing then what I know about movies and remakes now, this is what I thought the Karate Kid was. The story of Will Smith's son going across the world to help Jackie Chan find the 12 talismans of whatever happened in that series on Jetix. The point is, for the longest time, my understanding of the franchise was cultivated through cultural osmosis. You know, wax on, wax off, sweep the leg, and whatever else they would parody on Nickelodeon cartoons. But eventually I would be given my entry point to the series proper. And it came from none other than Hollywood's favorite trope these days, the Legacy sequel. But not the Legacy sequel they're making now. No, this came a few years back with the YouTube Red turned Netflix series, Cobra Kai. That's right, before I went back and watched the entire franchise for the first time, aside from the remake which I had grown up on, my big entry point from the series was through the perspective of none other than Johnny Lawrence, the villain of the original Karate Kid movie, depending on who you ask. And after watching all the movies, most of the movies at least, and the entirety of the Cobra Kai series up to this point, I'm left here watching this trailer wondering, what story is there left to tell? Legacy sequels are nothing new. I mean, they're practically the dominating forces of franchise filmmaking, overtaking the entire medium. But they're usually born from a long gap between installments. You know, Star Wars had 30 years between Return of the Jedi in 1983 and The Force Awakens in 2015. Sure, there were the prequels, but even then, that's a 10-year gap between Star Wars movies. But Karate Kid, this is not a dormant franchise. So that's what I want to explore today. What is the nature of a Legacy sequel? How do they normally play out? What are the tropes and trappings a lot of them fall into? And why is it that Karate Kid legends can't really do them the same way other revived 80s franchises can? And if that is the case, then where potentially could this new movie go? So with that all out of the way, let's discuss. So for any of you not in the know, a Legacy sequel is a film released in a franchise that has been long dormant for quite a while, or around 10 years or so. We all have ADHD these days, so quite a while is just a noticeable amount of time, typically about a generation or so. Long enough so that people who enjoyed the original back when it was released are old enough to have their own kids to watch the latest installment with. 10 years might be a little bit tight for that. It's typically closer to 20 or 30 years. But we're getting a live-action remake of Moana and How to Train Your Dragon at this point, so what does time mean anyways? Think films like Tron, The Matrix, Mad Max, Creed, Ghostbusters, Jurassic Park, Bad Boys, Indiana Jones, Top Gun. I could spend all day reading this list I got from typing in Legacy sequels into Google, but I think you get the idea. Now that we all can recognize what a Legacy sequel is, what are some of the tropes and trappings a lot of them seem to fall prey to? Well, most of them typically follow the same formula of it's been a long time, usually the amount of time in the real world it's been since the last installment. When we pick back up with the lead of the original franchise, now more often than not a broken shell of their former self. Doesn't matter if the last one ended with them all riding off into the sunset or celebrating with a bunch of teddy bears. For one reason or another, all that they worked for failed, and now they live a sad hermit life just kinda waiting to die. But then, we meet our new, young, plucky, focus group tested hero, or group of heroes if you're smart, as they seek the aid of the last story's protagonist. Because somehow, the evil they vanquished in the original story, it's come back, and stronger than ever. It's gonna take the combined power of these new champions teamed up with the old one as a mentor figure to stop whatever horrors this villainous force has in store for this world. And if we're lucky, or allow our favorite characters to get a nice send-off, allowing them to go on one final adventure and then inevitably ride off into the sunset. Or what usually happens is they get pushed aside and disrespected throughout the entire adventure and then die in an anticlimactic manner. You know, these are the only options we get. The story must go on for that almighty dollar. And these old actors' likenesses, they ain't cheap. If that all sounds kinda lame and generic, well, that's how a lot of these turn out. Forced continuations to a story that otherwise wrapped up pretty nicely years ago, but whose graves have been desecrated, dug up, and now are put on display for the entire world because intellectual property, that's worth its weight in gold. You know what, whatever, I don't own these properties, these are studios with bottom lines to meet. They're gonna do what they can to maximize whatever revenue streams they can. That's just business. They can't all be Back to the Future where studios are gonna have to pry the rights out of Robert Zemeckis' cold, dead hands. However, though I might be weary of seeing this formula rehashed time and time again, every so often, we do see some diamonds in the rough. Films like Blade Runner 2049, Creed, Tron Legacy. I mean, these are films I really well and truly enjoy, completely independent from the franchises they derive from. At the end of the day, all I want is good storytelling, and I don't really care much where it comes from. And so it was only a matter of time until the Karate Kid franchise took part in this trend. Except there's just one problem. They've already kind of done this. Maybe not necessarily in a movie, but in that little known web series I mentioned earlier, Cobra Kai. Yes, Cobra Kai is a legacy sequel that is being carried on to the medium of television rather than film, but it still has all the same qualities as the films I've mentioned before. Picking up with characters in the movies now many years on, played by the same actors, effortlessly sliding back into these roles. Only, Cobra Kai takes a slightly different approach. You see, unlike all those other examples where we meet back up with the hero only now they're a shell of their former self, this time around, there's a bit of a twist. True, our protagonist is a washed-up depressed character from the original story, but it's not the hero of that beloved 80s tale, Ralph Macchio's Daniel LaRusso, but rather his foil, Johnny. Yeah, if the title of the series didn't give it away, it's actually William Zabka's Johnny Lawrence who we'll be following throughout this adventure. Finding him 30 years later, still not being able to live down the defeat that has gone on to define his life. This all changes, however, when he meets the newest tenant in his apartment complex, Miguel. New in town and starting a brand new life in sunny California with his mom and grandmother, Miguel doesn't have a lot of friends, and at first, Johnny has no intention of helping him change that. And in a similar setup to the original Karate Kid, Miguel finds himself the subject of much ridicule and bullying. So much so that one night out at a convenience store, Miguel is assaulted by his fellow classmates, and at the last second, Johnny swoops in and saves the boy from a world of pain. Now understanding what the boy's been going through, Johnny makes a decision. He's gonna teach this skinny nerd how to defend himself the only way he knows how, using Cobra Kai's karate. And thus, the villainous dojo is reborn. But this time, it's Johnny running the show. And that's pretty much the setup for the series. Johnny's gonna resurrect Cobra Kai, and alongside his star pupil Miguel, the two of them are gonna transform it from a system designed to pump out nothing but bullies into a way for nerds and outcasts to flip the script and become badass. As far as pitches go, this is about as good as I think a legacy sequel can get. The series has a lot of things going for it, but its undeniable greatest strength is the relationship between Johnny and Miguel. Even though it's something we've seen before, in fact many times in this franchise, Cobra Kai always manages to play it straight and genuine. These two guys love each other. There's a deep bond there, and at the end of the day, that bond has always been what Karate Kid is about. This is all a long-winded way of me saying, I really do believe Cobra Kai manages to capture the heart and soul of what made the Karate Kid special, and reintroduces it for a whole new audience. An audience like me who really didn't know much about the Karate Kid until this show came out. And that's really the whole goal of a legacy sequel. To get a brand new generation of moviegoers, or in this case TV watchers, interested in a franchise that hasn't been relevant in decades. But this is where the problem I mentioned comes in from earlier. Cobra Kai's been on the air since 2018, or since 2013 if you count William Zabka and Ralph Macchio's appearance in How I Met Your Mother, which I do. That's over 7 years of storytelling this franchise has seen. Not exactly what I'd call dormant. But alright, we've resurrected the franchise, so why not have some fun with it, right? Well, that is where the other concern comes in. As I said, 7+ years of storytelling has left this movie with a lot less options for what they can pursue. You want to retell the story of the Karate Kid starring a new, young, up-and-coming talent? Well, we already kind of did that, both with Robbie, Miguel, and Sam. So we can't even have the twist that the kid is a different gender. Though I'm pretty sure the next Karate Kid already kind of treaded that ground.
What's wrong with you? Are you crazy?
In addition, following the kids of the original installment also is kind of off the table since that's well-trodden territory at this point. So much so that those kids we once were following are now entering their college years. But I don't really need to speculate too much about the protagonist of this story, considering the fact we're not in the dark on that one. As Ben Wong will be playing Lee Fong, the new Karate Kid, or Karate 25-year-old, though Ralph Macchio was also in his 20s when he first played Daniel. Funny enough, the only Karate Kid, in the movies at least, has been Jaden Smith, but I don't foresee him coming back for this one. As we've seen from the trailer, Ralph Macchio and Jackie Chan will be reprising their roles and helping this kid, I guess, win another tournament. It looks like he's getting bullied and he needs as much guidance in karate as possible. Big difference this time around is that Lee actually does have some karate experience under his belt, or kung fu, since I'm pretty sure that's what Jackie Chan's Han's character teaches.
I will teach you real kung fu.
But it looks like they're going to try to find a way to bridge the gap. Apparently Han also knew Miyagi, so I guess that's furthering the Miyagi storyline.
You knew Mr. Miyagi?
Which, if you didn't know, is very prominent in Cobra Kai. Yeah, Daniel can't go 5 minutes without glazing his former mentor. You know what? I get it. but don't revive Pat Morita with CGI again. Got it? Gah. Based on this trailer, it looks like we're going to be retreading the same ground we've done before. Kid comes to town, gets bullied, needs to learn how to hone their skills under a proper instructor, or instructors in this case, and forge a father-son bond, the likes of which this series is practically patented at this point. I just don't know how much different this film is going to be that makes it stand out from the rest of the pack. Each movie in the franchise explores the story through a different angle. The first one being the most simple. New kid in town, gets bullied, trained by a secret karate master, and uses his newfound skills to build up his confidence, take down his bullies, and win the girl of his dreams. It's very straightforward. The sequel, Karate Kid 2, goes into more detail and fleshes out Miyagi's past, taking us to Okinawa, and furthering the relationship between Daniel and Mr. Miyagi. This time around, it's not just Miyagi being there to support Daniel, but Daniel also manages to be there for his mentor and friend during his time of need. Following Miyagi's father passing away shortly after returning to Okinawa, an old rivalry reignites. This being the form of Miyagi's past friend turned rival, Sato Taguchi, accompanied by his nephew and star pupil, Chosen Taguchi. This ultimately culminates in a fight where the two's respective pupils engage in a final showdown, only this time, it's life or death. Personally, I think this one's a little underappreciated. It's not as good as the first, but it's solid enough. The relationship between Daniel and Miyagi is always on point. The lessons are meaningful and can be interpreted in many ways. The villains are endlessly entertaining to watch, and I really like that hurricane action scene. Karate Kid 3 is definitely a step back, returning the story to the San Fernando Valley, and once again pitting Daniel up against a rival Cobra Kai student, this time around being the bad boy of karate, Mike Barnes. It's certainly the weakest of the original three, rehashing similar story beats from the 1984 classic, and at times just making both Daniel and Miyagi look downright stupid.
What do we do if they come back?
However, it does manage to go about introducing the best villain in the entire franchise. Not only bringing back Martin Kove's John Kreese, but also introducing us to Ian Thomas Griffin's co-Cobra Kai sensei, Terry Silver.
Say it! Cobra Kai never dies. Bet your ass.
And as far as 80s oil tycoon business exec types being the villain, this guy is one of the greats. He is just out of control and endlessly hateable. Which admittedly isn't saying much considering I trust an 80s businessman about as much as I trust a glory hole in a gas station bathroom not to give me syphilis. But he managed to clear that low bar with style and flair. As I've mentioned, I've still yet to see the next Karate Kid, so I can't really speak much in terms of its quality, though if even a fraction of its reputation is true, this might just be one of those chapters best left unread. And finally, there's a 2010 Karate Kid reboot, which now has been retconned to be a continuation of the original continuity. And it was pretty solid for what it was. I definitely enjoyed the change of location. Swapping out sunny California for the big city of Beijing, China, really helped this one stand out and gave it its own unique identity. And Jaden Smith's performance as Dre Parker was incredibly impressive for a kid his age. Being only 11 years old whilst filming, I also just enjoyed getting to dive into the roots and culture of his martial arts. Though it wasn't karate, I was able to look past that because of how solid the rest of the movie was. I don't know if it holds a candle to the original, but I think it deserves its place alongside the rest of the films in the franchise. And that brings to the new one, Karate Kid Legends, and to be honest, I don't really see what this one has to offer. Other than just giving us more Karate Kid, which we've been getting for the better part of the last decade. Sure, it might be interesting to see Daniel and Mr. Han team up, but if you've been watching Cobra Kai, you'll know a lot of characters from the Karate Kid franchise have re-emerged. So seeing yet another mentor pop up, at this point, it's just kinda old hat. I've seen friends turn rivals, enemies redeem themselves, and the never-ending battle for the soul of the valley play out in a way that, honestly, I don't really see much room for improvement. As it stands, the plot just reads as Kung Fu prodigy Li Feng is uprooted from his home in Beijing and forced to move to New York City. When a friend needs his help, Li enters a karate competition. Li's teacher, Mr. Han, enlists the original Karate Kid, Daniel LaRusso, for help. I mean, what does this even mean? The Google synopsis is even dumber. After moving to New York City with his mother, Kung Fu prodigy Li Feng struggles to let go of his past as he tries to fit in with his new classmates. When his new friend needs his help, Li enters a karate competition, but his skills alone aren't enough. With help from Mr. Han and Daniel LaRusso, he soon learns to merge two styles into one for the ultimate martial arts showdown. What the hell is this? This sounds more like the plot synopsis of the live-action Dragon Ball movie than a Karate Kid sequel. Also, we've seen this too with Miguel merging Miyagi-Do and Cobra Kai fighting tactics to win the Sekai Taika. Or, we haven't seen him do that yet, but I'm pretty sure that's where it's heading. I just don't know what to get excited about with this one. And I don't need the filmmakers to come out and tell me what's gonna happen scene by scene. I'm just asking for an exciting pitch. And that's the uphill battle this film is facing. There really are no waters left uncharted in this franchise. And that's not an insult to Cobra Kai. That's just saying that they're really at the end of the story. The rivalries have been squashed. Characters are all on the same side. They want the same thing. All that's left is to fight the final battle that's been culminating for the better part of a decade. And then, I don't know, I guess we all get to go home early. Johnny and Daniel have made amends. Hell, Chosen Taguchi and Mike Barnes have reemerged in some way, shape, or form. We've seen their kids make up. We've seen their kids make out. And the new cast is really solid. They're fun, they're charming, they can do the martial arts well enough. I don't like to judge films with a checklist looking for things like diverse casts, deconstructive elements, and unexpected plot twists. You know, things we're told modern audiences really value. But if we have to grade on these metrics, Cobra Kai passes with flying colors. We've seen kids face different struggles like being new to a school, the wealth status they're born into, or the features they possess that others consider deformities. We've seen them rise above these labels and socially imposed constraints, and self-actualize into well-adjusted grown adults. This also helps with the fact that the cast has grown up with the show and a portion of the audience. In fact, funny enough, the actor who plays who I consider to be the main student and the true next Karate Kid, Jolo Maridueña's Miguel Diaz, is actually younger than Ben Wong, the next Karate Kid. That's not an indictment on the actor or anything, I just think it's kind of funny. There was a time when the idea was floated that maybe this movie would take place in a different universe from Cobra Kai, but it seems those were just rumors, and this film's gonna take place 3 years after the ending of season 6. That's a solid enough reason for why we won't be seeing most of the kids in the film. I imagine the bulk of them would either gone off to college or end up wherever their storyline's taking them. The movie also takes place in New York, so that's an additional degree of separation justifying why most of the cast probably won't return. A final tendency I wanted to address that a lot of legacy sequels are guilty of is the abundance of reverence for the original film. A lot of times you'll see these longing, lovingly crafted shots of settings, locations, and iconography from the original feature. Things like a musical beat when you see the Millennium Falcon, an extended shot of a beloved actor's face as they return for the first time in years, and if you're really ghoulish, it's even from beyond the grave, or even a gratuitous line ripped straight from a previous installment.
Get away from her, you bitch!
Get away from her. You bitch.
Scenes like this are a dime a dozen in legacy sequels. And once again, Cobra Kai has done them all. From the crane kick to Miyagi's hand clap to heel, it's just no longer special seeing these legends from a time long since past re-enter the screen for one final adventure. The only exception to this being Jackie Chan's Han, who admittedly it has been some time since we've caught up with him. There's also the argument that since this is a movie, it's going to have a much wider reach than a niche show like Cobra Kai. So for a lot of audience members, I'm sure this is the first time they've seen Daniel LaRusso on screen in quite a while. But it isn't for the actor. For him, it's just another day in the life of Daniel LaRusso, a character he could play in his sleep. So the specialness of seeing Daniel back on screen is lost, but maybe it's a good thing. You know, I've never loved that almost biblical level of reverence these legacy sequels held for the original installments. Things like those built-in silences for applause when characters like Andrew Garfield or Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man pop in the frame. Just come across awkward upon a rewatch. So perhaps they're going to treat this one like the further adventures of Daniel LaRusso uncovering the secrets of Miyagi, alongside Master Han, who just so happens to also be in need of his dearly departed old friend's wisdom, which now has been passed on to Daniel. Definitely how they link the two Karate Kid movies is the thing I'm most interested in seeing, though I can't say that's as exciting of a pitch as something like the villain from the first Karate Kid is now the protagonist of the series. That is a stroke of brilliance I've seen very few legacy sequels capture. But I think it's about time we wrap things up. I'm still cautiously optimistic to see what this film has in store, but in all honesty, I'd have also not been opposed to following the end of Cobra Kai, just allowing this franchise to be put to rest. I would maybe be interested in a Miyagi prequel, but I don't know, maybe that would just end up taking away from the mystique of his character. You don't need to go and explain every element of your universe. The mystery, after all, is part of the fun. And I'm sure the Karate Kid franchise is in good hands.
It's not like they're owned by a company that is well known for milking every last drop of money out of a franchise that never needed to exist to begin with.
I mean, we can't be that unlucky, right? Right? Right?
It's Morbid time. There's gonna be
Ezekiel
carnage.
Sims. He was in the Amazon where she was researching spiders right before she died.
It's Morbid time.